their desire for control becomes a limiting factor because they're just not willing to let go of anything. The term that I love that we've used is replace yourself. Put somebody else into that seat. You go and work on something higher or different. And that way you've built an actual structure that is repeatable.
If new business feels like wind in your sails, you're probably doing something right. Hi, my name is Lliam Holmes, and welcome to Beyond the Startup. This is where we have business owners come in and talk to us about how they started their business, share all of the bumps, all their successes, and hopefully be able to give you some insights as to things that you might be able to use in your business. And so today we have Clay Snellings, Snellings and Walters, and he's going to talk to us about his experience in coming from the ground up in that insurance company. Clay, would you like to introduce yourself?
Super. Thank you, Liam. Clay Snellings, and I've worked at Snellings Walters Insurance Agency since June of 1986. So this year will be my 40th anniversary. And our company was founded in 1952 by my father, John Snellings. And so I had the luxury of working with my father and with siblings in my family. And today our company looks much differently than it did when I started there 40 years ago. And it's just been a great ride, and I'm happy to be here.
Oh, well, thank you. That's a really great place to start. Can you maybe talk to us a little bit about that sort of early foundation? Because you kind of walked into a family business, right? That, to your point, was very different than what it looks like today, right? And so, talk to us a little bit like, what'd you walk into?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, we used to joke and call my father the benevolent dictator because it was his company that he started, and he came up with most of the systems and processes and hired most of the people, and he set our compensation and pretty much ran the place. And at the time that I came there as a 22-year-old straight out of college, I had an older brother, Bill, who worked there, and he's 13 years older than me. So he was experienced. And then I think our total staff in 1986 was 10 people. And I think we did about $1 million in revenue, which, it only took my dad 30 some odd years to go from zero to $1 million. Granted, prices were lower back then, but still, it was a milestone. And so it felt a lot like a family business, although we did have 10 people on staff. As a new person in the company, learning the industry, learning the products, getting training, having a mentor. I'll never forget Nancy, who was my mentor, as she kind of taught me how we do what we do.
Yeah. In 1986, if you kind of put that into perspective, there was a lot that didn't exist yet, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like there's a lot has changed. You think about like not only the last couple of years, but you go back to 1986 and it was a completely different universe, right? And so talk to me a little bit about what was that inflection point? What was that point where you kind of, came into the business? Obviously you had to learn the ropes from Dad and from Nancy, right? But there was that gestalt, there was that point at which you're like, okay, now I know what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. Here's what we're going to do. I'd love to hear, your thoughts about, when was that point and what pushed you in that direction?
So a couple of different points in my career. First was 1993. That's the year that my dad decided to retire at the age of 70. And so my brother, Bill Snellings, and Nunley Walters, whose name is on the door, both of them had been at the company for 20 years at that point. So they were certainly my superiors. And at that point, I was brought into the management team, having had been there for about 7 years at that point and was doing well. And so I felt that was a major milestone where the three of us were in debt to my father because we bought him out. Okay. So you got a 10-year note that you've got to service to buy out the founder. And we're making the decisions as a 3-person team of how are we going to grow this business and how are we going to continue to be successful. And, what are we going to do budgeting wise or operational? And then technology was becoming a major part of our business in the early 90s. And frankly, one of my leadership roles from like 93 to 2000 was IT guy.
Hmm.
So everything we did in our company related to going to paperless environment and just lots of things in the insurance industry that caused us to be more efficient using technology. Those kinds of things happened in that first era of maturing as a business leader and as a company.
Yeah. And that was kind of what I was thinking my way through too, right? You're brought into the business, right? You're the son.
Mm-hmm.
They're trying to teach you the business,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I'm sure your kids like mine, you grew up listening to dad talk about work all the time, right?
Worked there in high school in the summers.
Right. And
Yeah.
just like my kids, right?
Yeah.
And so you go through this. You get into that business. All of a sudden, dad wants to retire.
Mm-hmm.
Proverbially, you got to put the big boy pants on, right? Because now you're going into that leadership role.
Yeah.
And in your case, it sounds like it's three amigos, right? And you guys are like, okay, now what?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I'm going to guess that that's where the real learning started.
It did.
Right?
And who is going to be the manager or the president, and who's going to run sales, and who's going to run service in our business because we're in the customer service business, who's going to be operations, how's accounting going to work, and luckily, as I'm sure you saw in your company, if you got key people who were already there that you just want to continue to develop. But yeah, there was a lot of learning to do. And the next milestone in the evolution of the company happened in 2007. And that's when Nunley Walters was getting ready to retire. And my brother and I are now pretty experienced at running the company. And I think our revenue in 2007 was probably $6 million. And Bill and I, basically, I can remember this like it was yesterday. We're sitting there saying, okay, do we want to bring others into the company in ownership? Or do we want to make this the Bill and Clay show and continue just to be a company that nurtures its clients and has some growth goals and things like that? So we basically said, we've got some talented people working here and we can recruit some others. Let's make this about more than us. And at that point, Lliam, we spread the ownership when it was time for Nunley to be purchased. He owned about 30% of the company at the time of his retirement. And so another couple of guys who were a little younger than me came in as partners. And what was so refreshing was the energy, the ideas, the skill sets that they brought. We saw the business really scale. And I'll tell you that my recollection of the time from, say, 07 up until around, frankly, about 2018, we learned how to attract talented people in the industry and some outside the industry and really start to build the revenue model and the service model so that we could become a larger company. And over that next 10 years, I think we probably went from $5 or $6 million in revenue to probably around 12. So it was a nice run, and we learned a lot about getting things more structured with governance and leadership and all that. And in that time frame, because I know you're an EOS company as well, we adopted the EOS system into our company in the summer of 2013. So that was a big time change as well.
Do you feel like that was one of those foundational structural decisions? Like you could have gone left, you could have gone right.
No, it wasn't. Yeah.
Right?
Quick story there, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So I was put into the president and CEO seat in about 2010 or 11. And I joined Vistage. You're familiar with that organization? So Vistage, great CEO roundtable group where I'm getting together once a month with 12 to 15 other CEOs, not all in my industry, and you help each other with your issues, right? And I learned so much about leadership and about other companies facing similar challenges and unique challenges and all of that. So, long story short, as the leader of our company, we would get together um, every 60 days for half a day planning meeting.
Mhm.
And we would have a bunch of metrics that were telling us how the business was doing. And we would have great conversations about great ideas about, let's do this over the next 60 days. And at the end of that meeting, we'd say, okay, ready, break. And everybody would go back to their offices. We'd come back together 60 days later, and our execution on our strategic initiatives was not good.
Mm.
So life happened. I got busy, no accountability, all that kind of stuff started to be evident. And I'm the leader, so it's on me, right? And so, long story short, I'm in Vistage, and we invited this guy named Walt Brown to come and talk to our Vistage group, one of our meetings, and he was an EOS implementer. And basically, he explained the EOS platform to our group. And I went back to my senior leadership team, and I said, guys, I think we have something we ought to try. So we invited Walt to our office. He went through the presentation of how EOS works, and the team was behind it. And we implemented EOS in August of 2013, August of 2013. And I will tell you that hard to get going and a lot to learn and all that, as you well know. But that really was a game changer for the scalability of where we are.
Yeah, because it's interesting, right? And all of us have it, no matter what business you're in, right? Where you kind of go from this, I or we, a small we, make all the decisions. And as much as you try to push those decisions down to your department managers, or you try to get them to think strategically about parts of the business, or even to own a piece of that business figuratively, right? It's really hard to get someone to step up to do that, right? And I think all businesses go through that. And I think for many businesses, that's one of those limiting factors that they never get over, because they never quite figure out how to get beyond that in some sort of meaningful, measurable, articulate way, right? And I think we were very similar, right? In the fact that EOS was the framework that we used, right? And it didn't mean that we didn't still have to do the work, because we did, right? But at least we had a common language, a common platform, a common framework that we could all look at and say, well, we're supposed to be doing this, and we're supposed to be doing that, right? And I think that helped get us unstuck, right? And I'd love to hear a little piece of your journey there, but I know for us, when we saw EOS, we tried to self-implement, and we learned really quickly that self-implementing was really hard, right? Because you can't be the facilitator
So hard.
and the participant, right? And we very quickly learned, the value of actually hiring an implementer and having them walk us through that process and teach us those new skills, right? And second time took first time was rough.
When did you try it the first time? Do you remember?
Oh, I did. We started in 2010.
Okay, right before us.
And we probably spent the next 2 years self-implementing. And at the end of that 2 years, we were in a position where we could still see value in it. But I think we could recognize that we weren't it.
Yeah.
Right. And that it was actually valuable having someone else come in and do that for us. And, we've never looked back ever since.
That's one of the, when I was thinking about our talk today and about lessons learned and how did you learn some of the leadership skills and all this kind of stuff. And basically, when you're in a small company like I joined all those years ago, our trade association, for example, the Independent Insurance Agents of Georgia, was a great outlet for me to talk to my peers who worked at other places and share ideas and all that. And Vistage was one of those places. And EOS, through our implementer, was one of those places as well, because, you don't know what you don't know. And we've hired sales consultants to come in and help teach our salespeople a system that works for our brand and the way that we want to do business with our customers. And just outside expertise is one of those things that you hate paying for it, because a lot of times you're like, oh gosh, another consulting business.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, you're going to pick some good ones and you're going to pick some bad ones over time. But I think just knowing in business that you don't know everything, and to get outside counsel is certainly been good for us.
Yeah.
Certainly.
And I don't know about for you guys, but for me, the value of a peer group or, Vistage for you or IAG, right? Or some of these sort of industry groups is it's really hard to recognize something about your business. But when you see it in someone else's business, it's a lot easier to recognize, right? You're like, I don't know. I don't understand why they do that. Why doesn't
never
that
do
fit
it that way, right? Yeah.
But I think that through that education, almost like as a bystander, right? And seeing how they handle these challenges, to me is almost the value of those groups beyond the formal education, right?
Yeah.
I like to say it's the spaces in between, right? It's that dinner that you went to where you got into that one conversation that had nothing to do with, right? But it was topical either for you or for them. And maybe a couple of years later, all of a sudden you're like, I remember that conversation and that made sense. And I see what they did and I see what he did. And
Right.
we should split the difference, right?
Oh, big time.
Much easier to see it in someone else's business sometimes, I think, than to see it in your own.
Totally. Very, very much, very true. So, yeah.
Yeah. I'd love to hear how at Snellings Walters, you guys, from my viewpoint, you really mushroomed, right? You went from this really small $1 million business to $6 million business to bigger, to bigger, to bigger, right? And it seems like, at least from my perspective, that it accelerated every year over year.
Yeah.
Right. And so, number one, that's hard to do. Right. Number two is that there's operational challenges, there's financial challenges, there's skills you don't have yet that you have to learn. And you're going to learn those quickly, right? Because if you don't learn those skills quickly, then you're going to be either stuck or sometimes your company actually gets demoted back down to a level that you can't operate efficiently, right? Because when you're doing things and everything's chaotic, you eventually have to step back and then rebuild, rethink, retrench before you can step forward, right?
Yeah.
I'd love to hear about some of your experiences, things that you might share with somebody who might be going through that today.
Well, I'll tell the story of the adoption of EOS. So when you are onboarding EOS, and we used an implementer from the beginning. And so we spent 2 days on a retreat with our senior leaders, and we wrote our first VTO, which is basically your business plan. And what do we believe? Why do we believe it? What do we want to look like in 1, 3, and 10 years? All of that. And then you go from there to creating your org chart, or we call the accountability chart. And in doing that, that's where we realized that our names were on a lot of multiple seats inside the company. And in the beginning of EOS, because we were trying to get everything set up right and do things right, we also realized that some of our senior leaders were some of our best salespeople. And they got distracted, if you will, from thinking about our sales goals and our revenue production to getting the accountability chart and the vision set properly and the new processes and the new data points and the right people in the right seats and all the other components of running our company better on an EOS platform. We saw our revenue start to flatten off. And we were like, whoa. So at that point, this was 2018, we realized, one of our best salespeople was our integrator, in EOS term for basically COO. And so we said, we got to get somebody else to do this. And of course, in our business, paying for non-production related overhead and people costs is expensive, right? And so biting that bullet and saying, hey, we're going to invest $200,000 in a COO was scary, was a risk, right? And so we started doing these things, and we got people in working in their strengths as we learned that we all can't be just administrators running EOS platforms. And that's when we realized that, delegate and elevate, all these terms that you kind of use and learn in business, is to put people in seats where they're suited and strong, and then let the revenue producers get out there and do their thing. And I think that's where we had this little stall out, and then it started to really go, because the operators of the business were making sure we were ready to scale and that we had the tools to serve our clients, and that we had people in training so that if somebody, was leaving or whatever, that we weren't left with a big hole in the company.
Sure.
So I can't even remember what your question was exactly, but that was really a transformative time where you were talking about the growing of our revenue, where we went from $12 million in about 2014, 15, and really took off. And today I feel like I'm bragging, but we're $30 million today. And so we've seen the company be able to double in revenue size about every 5 or 6 years, which is, you do the math, that's 15% growth. So it's healthy and steady, but really getting those people in seats where they're strong across the organization has been super strong. And we could talk all day about the influence of technology and AI tools and all that stuff that is changing the game and what we do. I'm sure every business is feeling it, right?
They are, right? And, I think that, I think in life, the only thing that's constant is change, right? And at least my view of it, no matter what industry you're in, change is happening. It's going to, at some point, it's showing up on your door, right? And you really have two choices. You have two options. I can embrace it or I can fight it. There really aren't any other options, right? Now you could only fight it a little bit, or you could embrace it a little bit. There's crazy stuff. But at the end of the day, you either see this as an impediment or an opportunity, right? And I think that most people, we don't like change, right?
Right.
And as a result, our natural instinct is we want to fight it. We want to step back. Well, let's see what everyone else does. Well, we don't want to be on the bleeding edge, right? Well, but the reality of it is it's coming to your doorstep, right? And at least in my view of life, those early years when this change is happening, these are what I call the forgiveness years, right? Because no one knows. Everybody's trying to figure it out. But you're learning, right? You're learning to sit, to crawl, to run, and there's forgiveness at this point in time. But if you wait 4 or 5 or 6 years and everyone else has developed a model, and now you're like, okay, me too, you never learned all those lessons because you were like, hey, we're going to hang back a little bit, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that can be, a foundational thing, that it's almost a mindset where you have to know, like, hey, look, being a business owner comes with risk, right? Get comfortable with that, right? There are going to be decisions that you're going to make that hopefully they work out. And if you've done a little bit of planning and it doesn't work out, at least it didn't kill it, right? And sometimes that happens too. I don't know what, your story or your thoughts about this is, but if I look at MIS and I think about the years and years that we've been in business, the 35 years, we didn't hit every one of them out of the ballpark. There were times it cost us, it hurt us, right? But I think back on some of those times, and I'll tell you, without exception, I'm grateful for each one of those times, because each one of those things taught us something. They motivated us to do something different. They allowed us to learn a hard lesson that maybe we wouldn't have learned otherwise. Because sometimes when things are good, as much as I hate to say it, you might get a little bit complacent, right? Because there's nobody kicking your butt, making you learn these lessons that you really should be learning. And so all of a sudden, out of the blue, here comes a new competitor, or here comes a thing, or maybe your largest customer leaves and you're like, oh my gosh, all of a sudden we're going to have to do something. Those are those transformational periods, right? And I'm sure that you guys probably had a few of those too, right?
Certainly. It's, I can, yeah, plenty of them. That almost too many to name, but I was thinking about as you were describing that evolution and experiences that so many people in our industry, in the world of insurance agents, they make their agency their lifestyle business. And it's just, a person is the primary, salesperson, generates the revenue, maybe has a family member who's doing the books, all this kind of stuff. And their desire for control and for no change, their desire for consistency, I guess you'd like to say, becomes a limiting factor because they're just not willing to let go of anything. And because of that, it truly, I've talked to people frequently that, hey, we've been in business 30, 35 years and we are X, they're small, they're just still 2 or 3 people and they liked it that way. And so that's where, to our listeners who are trying to say, how do I scale this thing up? How do I how do I double this business? How do I prepare it to sell it one day or whatever the goal is? It's simply to follow a path where you're letting go. And a term that I love that we've used is replace yourself, put somebody else into that seat and you go and work on something higher or different. And that way you've built an actual structure that is repeatable. And so that's the big thing is I see lifestyle businesses a lot in profession. It could be in any business, really. I'm sure you see IT consultant firms and support firms that are just a one-person show, right?
Yeah.
And they love it that way. That's what they want.
Yeah.
But they're vulnerable as heck because that one customer can fire them and then they realize they're down 50%.
Yeah. In fact, 80% of IT providers are under 10 people in the United States.
Yeah.
Right? And I think it's exactly what you're saying, right? I know insurance is the same way. Right? Tons and tons of just really little guys.
Tons of them.
Right?
And we've got 105 people on our staff and 22 shareholders. So we've certainly broadened the ownership bucket as well as the people bucket. And so if you take out the big people in our industry, the Marsh and the Aon and Lockton, the big national worldwide brokers, when you look at privately held firms in a major metropolitan area like Atlanta, there's probably 2 or 3 insurance agencies that are larger than we are today. I don't say that for bragging purposes, but I say it out of thankfulness that, we were able to make a couple of good fork in the road decisions along with plenty of bad ones. I mean, I've had to divorce a business partner. We've been through a lot. We've had theft by an employee we had to get over, just, lots of problems. But at the end of the day, 40 years in the rearview mirror, we made more good fork in the road decisions than we did bad. And now, we've got a really good, viable company.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that I see in our company, and we're certainly not as big as you guys, but you guys must have come face to face with this as well. And that is the cultural component, right? At some point when you're little, I think about MIS when it was 5 or 6 of us, right? We could all get around a table and we were good, right?
It's family.
It's family, right? But at some point, you can't fit around the table. At some point, you've got to start thinking about structure. At some point, people have to own roles, right? And one of the interesting things that happens as that sort of progression happens is that people lose connection to the culture of the business. The why are we doing this? Why, what makes us different, right? And I know EOS for us really helped with that.
Wow. Big time.
Right?
Big time.
But I'd love to hear, gosh, as you guys went to 105 people, and particularly you guys have 22 others, right? I can't imagine having 22 decision makers, right? That's a lot, right?
Yeah.
And so that's a challenge we haven't gotten to yet. But I just think about this and I'm thinking like, how were you guys able to have such a rich culture? Because I know enough about you guys that you guys have an admirable culture, right?
Thank you.
And that's difficult to do, particularly at your size.
I appreciate that. And so, yeah, first thing on the shareholders, 22 of them, but we have 6 board members who make 99% of the decisions, right? A shareholder votes on the slate of who is going to be on the board.
I see.
But then the board, from a governance perspective, we make the decisions to hire the CEO and approve the budget and all those kind of things. So we do still have a manageable group of decision makers, if you will. But what you were saying a minute ago about the culture piece, and it's so cool for me to see this. Natalie, who runs our marketing and branding side of the business, and you guys do a wonderful job with this as well, but people see us on social media, for example, and they come up to me, strangers, and say, gosh, I just love y'all's content. And I'm like, I really appreciate you saying that. And we're conscious because of EOS to talk about our core values and to talk about our vision and to talk about our purpose statement, which I'll just segue to that real quick. Our mission statement, or our why statement, as we say it, is we lead to inspire confidence so that your potential is unleashed. And what I love about that mission statement, Lliam, is it doesn't say insurance.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't say customer service. It doesn't say ethical. It doesn't say quality. All those things are important. But why we exist is to everyone we touch, our employees, our customers, our suppliers, our partner vendors, is to say, if we can be related to these constituents and lead them in a way that inspires confidence in our relationships and how we do business, then the potential is unlimited. That's what unleashed potential means to me. So those are the things, when you talk about a strong culture, that those are some of the components. And the other thing that I'm so lucky that I get to do, after anyone has worked for our company for 90 days, then they have a meeting with me and we spend an hour together and we go through the VTO, the Vision Traction Organizer. And I pull it up on my screen and I usually start it with, these are the 6 key components of our business, and vision is one of them. And then I go through the vision statement, which describes the core values, and I tell them how they were created. And then we talk about our 10-year target. We talk about our niche in the market. We talk about our strategy going to the market. We talk about our guarantee, all those things that are part of this constitutional document that describes what is Snellings Walters. And I love doing that because it allows me to tell stories. And it also brings everybody on the same page as to, like you said, we get fragmented and distracted, and they're like, I'm not even sure what this company is trying to accomplish. I mean, I know what I got to do day to day as my job, but I'm not really sure how am I rowing the boat to help this company achieve its short, medium, and long range goals, and why do I care? Yeah. And those are the things that are just really powerful, and what I've loved about being in the role that I'm in today. And then I get to bring people to the same page about why they work here, why we hired them. I tell them, we hired you because we perceive that you align with our core values. And we're going to talk about that every 90 days, right? It's part of the EOS process. So that's kind of the long answer to that question.
To me, I think I heard 2 things that are worth repeating, right? Number 1, it's like the Simon Sinek thing, right? Start with why.
Yeah, that's where that came from.
Yeah, and it sounds so obvious, right? But have you ever sat down honestly and tried to figure out your why? That's not easy, right? It takes companies sometimes years, sometimes decades. And I think many of them actually never quite figure it out, right? Because they don't give it the attention that it deserves, right? But without understanding your why, you are literally blindfolded throwing darts against what you hope is a dart, right?
Yeah.
And so it really, behooves you to sit to think about, like, why are we doing this? And it's, it's not the obvious things like I need to feed my family, like that's not it, right?
Mhm.
It really is about, what is that core thing? And I think when you are very clear about your why, it's very clear to explain it to someone else.
Mhm. Yeah.
But when you're not clear, how do you explain that to someone else? Because, they'll never be as clear as you. And then they're going to turn around and tell somebody. It's kind of like the whisper game, right? And it's not long before the why doesn't exist, right?
Well said.
And then I think the other thing I heard was really just alignment,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we learned this lesson ourselves, a number of years ago in a couple of different ways. For most businesses, certainly we were not excluded from this. We only hired people when we needed people, right? Like the work was to the point where we didn't have enough people to do the work, so we had to go hire someone to help us do the work, right?
Mm-hmm.
But day one, we were like, you get the 2-part training, right? Good luck and hang in there, right? And we put them to work, and but what we realized was that was completely the wrong approach.
Mm-hmm.
And this was one of those things where you almost have to slow down to speed up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And today, when we hire somebody, they have a 90-day plan that's written down that we bring them in, and there's certain milestones, kind of like, you saying, they got to sit down with me for an hour and they got to go over the VTO, right? That's very strategic, right? That takes an incredible amount of commitment. That's very expensive to do that. But it really puts into focus that one word, which for me is alignment, right?
I love that. That's well
Because
said.
once you have alignment, and once your team is aligned, we're all pulling in the same direction, right? Whereas I think for many companies, what they tend to do is small tweaks.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality of it is these small tweaks are endless. And it is a Rubik's cube that does not want to be solved, right? And at some point, you really have to sit down and say, we would be better off if we just took 2 steps back, studied this problem, were thoughtful about our why, understood what alignment looked like, and then used a framework. We used EOS. You guys used EOS. Use what EOS gives you to really be able to understand, did I hire the right guy?
Mm-hmm.
Do we have the right metrics? Is it a cultural fit, right? And all of these things sound silly, right? Because they're not very complicated, but,
Right.
But how many of us got so stuck on that for years that we couldn't get over it?
I don't remember where I read the phrase work on the business, not in the business.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's an EOS thing or some other book. And the other business book and concept that really stuck with me in that vein was a book called The E-Myth of Small Business.
Yes. Michael Gerber.
Yeah, Michael Gerber. But it had to do with, the guy had a pie shop and he was really good at making pies, but he didn't know how to teach somebody else how to make pies or to scale the thing at all and all that. And that's, if you don't have a culture component and an alignment component to go with that, it's going to be harder. Now, I'll just add one other thing that's been really cool for us, in addition to EOS and Vistage and other things, is Culture Index, which is a program and a system that we use that everyone in the organization takes. And everyone who is a prospective employee, before we even interview them, they take. It's a quick word association thing, and it basically just shows us what their personality is like and where their strengths are and what their tendencies are. And it's really cool because it says the top graph, which is similar to the bottom graph. The top graph is what you've kind of been like intuitively since you were 6. Mm-hmm. And the bottom graph is what do you feel like you need to be at work? Mm. And it identifies the conflict that could be between what you believe you are innately from a social ego, sense of urgency, attention to detail, logic, intuition, all these things, versus what you think your job calls you to be. And we want to try to keep people from having these conflicts in their graphs so that they're not miserable,
Yes.
because you can only fake it for so long. And if you're in a system where you're in this state of stress and conflict between your natural tendencies and your work life, it's not going to be a good long-term outcome. So we're trying to make sure that we put people in the right place, so that, culture's good and all of that. And then the last piece on the whole culture thing and the vision and having people on the same page and understanding why they do what they do in their job and all of that is the EOS component of quarterly meetings. And we love those. Billy and Jennifer, our president and CEO, run those meetings for the most part. And the transparency that we bring to that meeting for everybody in the organization to know about how we're doing, revenue, retention, attrition of people, all these metrics that a lot of business owners would say, "Oh, they don't need to know that. Why would I share that with them?" And we're like, unless they understand how their role contributes to this and how achieving a goal is good for them, and why should they care, then that's part of the reason I believe that you get these big disconnects between, oh, it's just a job and I don't even really know what this company's trying to accomplish.
Sure.
And then those people are obviously, the top talent especially, they're more likely to go and find a company that does that. And so being able to attract and train and retain top talent is vital, as in any company.
Yeah. I'd love to hear your thoughts about growth mindset, right? These sort of founders, and clearly, you are the growth mindset. You started this business at $1 million when you stepped in. You guys are literally 30 times bigger than where you started, right? So clearly there's a growth mindset. I know when I look across many of our peers, right, there are people who have that same growth mindset versus people who are wanting to have a lifestyle business, right? But sometimes how do I turn that into action? Right? I'd love to hear from you. How were you able to turn your growth mindset actually into action?
Wow. I think it probably evolved as most things would, in that, I remember this. I remember in shortly after I came to work, I told you earlier that, my father used to set compensation. And when we changed our compensation model to one where people in sales could immediately know how they were going to be personally rewarded monetarily for success, that was a time when I started to make sense to me personally that, if I do more and do better and bigger and all that and more efficiently, that it can benefit me and my family immediately. And of course, everybody in our organization doesn't work on a compensation model like that. But as an owner, I think the growth mindset for me was triggered by that, where I realized, the sky is kind of the limit as to what this business can bring to the people that work there. And we just wanted to build on that, and then making sure that everyone in the organization who wasn't in a production role was also tied to growth is good.
Yeah.
And growth can bring rewards, because many times in a business, if you're in service especially, growth is bad. Growth is more work.
Yes.
And one of the things that I love to talk about when I'm meeting with our new people is I show them our revenue per employee matrix. And I show them, 1 year goal of this and 3 year goal of that and all this, growth. And I say, you're probably sitting there going, I'm in service. This just means I'm going to be working until 6 p.m. every night. And I assure them, I say, one of the most important metrics we have in this company is $250,000 of revenue per employee. So if we see that we grew by X percent or X number of dollars last year. We know we need 5 more people. And that's good for you because Lliam, you're in service today, you're in service level 1, but if we have 5 new people, you've now got somebody to mentor and somebody that you can be the manager of, and it's a promotion for you. And that gets people excited about growth. Because people love promotions, right? People love getting a bonus because they went from a junior to a senior. And so I think that's the component that I have embraced, if you will, through my business life to say, how can we communicate to everyone in the organization that growth is good? And not to mention from an ownership standpoint, shareholder value, which is an important term that we use at our company. Everything we do to increase the bottom line is bringing greater investment value to those people who are invested in the business.
Yeah.
So
good thoughts. One thought I was thinking as you were kind of going through that, and you see a lot of people like this, right? And I think it's an easy litmus test. If new business feels like wind in your sails, you're probably doing something right.
Yeah.
If new business feels like an anchor around your neck, you're probably doing something wrong, right? And the reality of it is, it can feel like both, but I think that it really, if you look at your staff, if you look at everyone else in your company and you land a new customer and everybody goes, right? You probably have some work to do, right? If everyone cheers, you're doing it right. And I feel like that's an easy litmus test, right? Clay, you've been so generous with your time and your knowledge and your talent. And I really am truly grateful. I am going to leave with one last question. And I'd love to know, 35 years later, do you still feel Dad's fingerprints on your business?
Yeah, that's a great question. I do, because I'm a storyteller by nature. And my nephew, Banks is his name. He's 22 years old. He just got his risk management degree from Georgia. He started working for us January the 1st, and I'm his mentor. And it's so funny that when I started to work at Snellings Walters in 1986, my dad was my age. So I am now full circle playing mentor to a 22-year-old. I'm 62 years old. And it's just really cool. And I'm trying to emulate a lot of the things that my dad did well with me, which was to teach me about what good customer service looked like. One of his big mantras was always, we're going to always have a live person answering the phone. You know how that's changed, right? Calling people back rather than email didn't exist in 1986, but picking up the phone and talking to people, all of those kinds of just blocking and tackling type skill set habits that a young person needs to learn. I look back on what my dad taught me, and his pictures on the wall in the company and a lot of his principles of how he started the business are still revered at our company. And so that obviously makes me real proud, because my dad lived to be almost 95 years old. He only passed away 7 years ago. And when I would go and visit him at their home, his favorite question was, what's going on at the insurance agency? And to be able to talk about growth and to be able to talk about additional owners and just all the stuff that he would be able to appreciate and be proud of, that was some of the most fun conversations that we would have. So,
what an honor and a privilege to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Right? And to have your dad proud of you, to be able to service that, and a blessing to be able to turn around and pass that now to another generation, right? That's truly a life's work, a blessing, both coming and going. And so, Clay, I really do appreciate you coming in and sharing your wisdom and knowledge with us.
My pleasure. My pleasure.